Leah and Antonello, we are hearing reports that two members of the National Guard have been shot here in Washington, D.C., just a few blocks from the White House from where we are standing. It is an active scene here on the corner of Connecticut Avenue and I Street. This is where we're hearing this incident took place. In fact, our photographer, Cody McGowan, as he was heading into office, heard the shots walking inside the building. At this point, it is unclear what led up to this suspected or reported shooting, but moments ago, I did see a member of the National Guard being wheeled away on a stretcher. In fact, here is that video. He was surrounded by paramedics and then headed inside of an ambulance to the hospital. But again, this is a very active scene in Washington, D.C. The members of the National Guard are here, a part of President Trump's federal takeover meant to crack down on crime.
You saw what's happening, the emergency, the lockdown over in Washington, D.C. And there was a shooting, and people from the National Guard, the Army Reserve, 2 people were shot. A person was shot in the head, one of the National Guards, and people are reporting that, that he died. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now over in Washington, D.C. as it's locked down. And, you really have to be careful out there as we go into these powerful events. A lot of people, like Juan 07, me, Jaco, a couple of people were expecting something like this to happen, but we didn't expect it to happen today. We expect it to happen in the next week into Christmas. We knew that there was wires, cables that was going around, and this was the intelligence drop that I want to give, that before Christmas they were planning something that was really going to, disrupt what was happening in the United States, connected to celebration of Christmas, people relaxing. So I was giving you the wires to tell you that the military from the UCMJ, they were already doing investigations, connected to these people, connected to the senator, and the FBI is investigating everything connected to these leaders, the senators, ex-CIA agents that were all, telling people to go against Trump. They were telling branches of the military, they were telling people inside the intelligence agencies, to go against Trump. And that was the coup. That was an open coup, a signal of what they were giving. So this is what it's all led up to this powerful moment. Now, people have lost their lives, and it's a sad report. And we know that Trump just now is calling in 500 more soldiers into Washington, D.C. But a lot of protocols are going to be kicked off through the military over this action. And it's so this is just a new developing story, and you'll see a lot of stuff out there. Information is coming out. But it makes me think about a lot of stuff. It really makes me think about a lot of stuff, because I had said this twice now, and on both times this happened. I had said before Charlie Kirk's assassination, before that happened, I had said it just days before. I said, another assassination attempt is coming. People are setting up for this. This is what I'm seeing in the wires. Everybody's kind of talking about this behind the scenes of Trump, this next attempt. So when I gave that warning, then all of a sudden it was Charlie Kirk that passed away. And then over the weekend, I gave you this. I gave you it's a special drop of what the wires, the cables were indicating over the weekend. And this was, I don't like to use the word trending, but all the wires in the underground, the underground cables inside of the dark net, a lot of places where the military moves information, very important journalists move a lot of different information there. All the wires were indicating that an assassination attempt was going to come, that a shooting was going to take place over in Washington, D.C. So I put out that report out there that, that we don't know when this is going to happen. That's why I was giving an emergency broadcast over the weekend. And I really thought it was going to be to Donald Trump. Of course, those events are probably most likely still going to happen with Trump. That's going to kick off, it's going to kick off a lot of things connected to the military, inside of the United States with what's happening, that the military is stepping in to stop all of the Civil War, Trump being shot, Charlie Kirk, now the National Guard. A lot of things have been happening. So the military is definitely going to step in. So this makes me really think. I had given this warning that something was going to happen, assassination, and then all of a sudden the Charlie Kirk event happened. And then all of a sudden this weekend I was giving this huge emergency update on the weekend, say, well, there's going to be a shooting, Trump. I was thinking about DC, so I thought it was going to be Trump. And I said, we don't know when this is going to happen. But the thing that makes it really strange is these military wires from different countries, people know about this. How do they know about this? This is really strange to me, because it's just really strange that a lot of people in different countries, military intelligence to the military, to different journalists, underground journalists, they kind of know what's going to kind of happen. And it's just kind of strange, it's just kind of, I don't want to say anything on this matter about the National Guard. I just wanted to tell you guys what's happening, a little bit of my viewpoints, but I don't want to say anything other than that, because it's more conspiracy. It's just more thoughts. It's at higher levels. We have to kind of respect this moment, what's happening in DC, panic. The military is obviously going to be really, really upset. Everybody's going to be really upset over this event. But we were talking about this. I've been talking about this. A few of us have already told you that this was going to happen, that they're going to stage an event to where they're going to go after the military. And this military, attack that was obviously coordinated directly at the National Guard, that this attack was going to kick off a bunch of events connected to what the military is going to do, the UCMJ, what's going to happen. And by January, I already know that the UCMJ was going to put some statements out pertaining to the civil unrest, because the story that I wanted to drop was for December, that a big event was going to happen in December. And within this big chaos event, that the UCMJ with national intelligence, with Trump, that they were going to, that they were going to try to move more military judges into different sectors around the United States, bring out more military lawyers. And it was a big thing. And what they were going to do is also Trump is going to sign some executive orders in January pertaining to the military, being really inside of the United States. And because we know that only through the military laws, through the laws of wars, only when 11.3 military operations are activated, that's when the real military can arrest people, civilians, and then court-martial them, a lot of these different things. There's a bunch of little side laws, though, where sometimes the military can make arrests. So that's why the military didn't really say anything on the 6 people that were talking about creating a coup inside the United States, what Trump called the seditious 6, and this senator, you know. So whatever's happening, if I know the wires, the cables, if the cables, the wires are running through different countries on the underground, the back channels, people kind of know about this. That means there's a huge, gigantic event even coming in even more, and must be bigger than what we're seeing today, this unexpected event today. That means in December, something even bigger can come in. Something even bigger is going to come in. And we know that Candace Owens is being threatened. She's saying that, that she has evidence. There's people that are really trusted. Emerald Robinson, the journalist that the CIA hates, New York Times hates her. A lot of people dislike Emerald Robinson, even Wikipedia, which is controlled by CIA operations. This comes from people who work for Wikipedia. They know that intelligence agencies from the United States control Wikipedia, especially the CIA. So all the bad stuff that they write about, Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Emerald Robinson, the stuff that they put inside of Wikipedia, that's to attack their character, their stories, what they're writing. But Emerald Robinson confirms, she confirms that Macron has set out, a hit to assassinate Candace Owens. And I was just now talking about this. A lot of this stuff is all coming out, and it's kind of it's kind of like a parent. I know these events are coming. I've known about all of this stuff, but I really care like a loving parent for the people out there, the people who aren't aware, people who are following my channel, because people still go through different emotions, through different thoughts. There's panic, chaos, and I feel like a parent to kind of tell people, yes, I know it's a hard moment, it's a hard time, but we have to calm ourselves down. We have to regain our senses, this energy, and we have to be really strong, because what we're going to see in these next months to come before the midterm elections is huge, gigantic. That's why Trump is going to sign some executive orders pertaining to the military, pertaining to military courts, military judges. That's going to be activated in a lot of different states, regions across the United States. That's something that people haven't seen, because a lot of stuff is going to kick off inside of the United States. And this is all connected to the drop that I've been telling you guys about. People arrested in Venezuela, military operations over in Serbia with the United States, with the Russian special forces at the Dominion offices. Now the full exposure is coming out that China, they were creating all the different products that goes inside of Dominion, those machines, and they were running operations, through different microchips and through different stuff that's connected to what's inside the Dominion, these Dominion voting machines. And they were running it through Taiwan. And then from Taiwan, they were moving over to Venezuela. They were moving it to Serbia, these operations. Now, a lot of countries are going to get caught up in this. There's going to be over 17 different countries across the world that's all going to get caught up in this election interference, election fraud controlled by CIA operations. And I was telling you in the last video that behind the scenes, this is one of the biggest pictures, is what JFK was talking about, that He wants to splinter the CIA to the wind to take it apart. This is the huge, gigantic operations that's happening, that's going to happen. A lot of people are going to get in trouble. And these are what their wires, this is what the back channels are talking about. And even though a lot of people don't like General Flynn for a lot of different reasons, he's a large part of these operations connected over to Admiral Rogers from NSA. But even General Flynn is giving you the information that they're going after the CIA, that they're going to take them apart. Now, this is all connected to a gigantic panic that I've been telling you that's really important, and that's the stolen elections. Now, this is all coming back, and the bad people, the deep state, the cabal, the CIA, different agencies, the black hats, the Democratic parties, they're all trying to stop Trump. They're scared of the military coming out. They're absolutely scared because Trump has been telling everyone now that, that this is punishable by death. Before Trump said this, only a few of us were really giving you the information that this event's coming. Even long before anybody was talking about it, this is going to happen inside the US or head towards this powerful event. And I was saying that this is going to happen. We're going into tribunals, all of this stuff. I've been saying it for years. We're here at this critical event. So I wanted to do that just to give some insight, give you guys some information, do this broadcast. I don't want to talk about advanced technology. I don't want to talk about what the military can do. I just want to respect this moment. Maybe in maybe about 2 or 3 weeks, then I'll do an update video that will be a lot different than this video. And so that's what's happening is this stolen elections. It's all coming back now. Now you have different people talking about Trump is upset with Maduro, and Trump wants revenge on Maduro because Venezuela, Maduro, China, the CIA, the deep state were trying to rig the 2024 elections. Now that story is out now. That story's out there. And they say that Trump is really upset, and you have high sources inside of intelligence agencies that is communicating with certain people. Even like Benny Johnson is saying that this is all revenge that Trump is going after Venezuela because they were trying to rig the 2024 elections. But Musk and a lot of people brought it to Trump's attention, and they stopped, the rigging at the last moments. A little bit of that is kind of true, a little bit. It's not the full story. The full story, I already gave it to you. It dates back to the early 2000s. It dates back to Bush, dates back to the Clintons, the CIA, Venezuela, the drug trade, training the prisoners or invasion into the United States, cryptocurrency. They were being trained how to use cryptocurrency, weapons. They use a lot of these people from prisons to become leaders of gangs inside of the United States. And they were planning this for a long time. What people always thought was conspiracy. The newspaper said this is conspiracy, that there's a new world order and this is all conspiracy, and they want to create civil war in the United States. So that way, the United States, the military can separate. They're going to need help. They're going to need order. So they're going to bring in from Europe all the troops from the United Nations to help facilitate, restructure the United States inside of a crisis. This plan is what you're kind of watching a little bit, that dated back to the early 2000s, these operations underneath Bush, underneath, one of the most evilest persons that, this Dick Cheney, connected to Bush Sr., these operations of the CIA. So you're kind of watching these plans develop, but there's a huge but. That's how the 17th letter of the alphabet came into these operations. That's how Trump came into these operations. That's how Flynn, that's how Ezra, that's how these operations connected to Admiral Rogers, they came in to stop those operations of trying to, this new world order that was planned for, or the whole world global dominance organization underneath the World Economic Forum, underneath the World Health Organization, underneath, more importantly, the Davos group connected over to the Jesuits, and the Jesuits running a lot of operations with Mossad, MI6, CIA, deep state intelligence agencies around the world. Now that plan to take over the United States, all of this stuff, it's been stopped. It's already been stopped. But the military, in stopping those plans, they created a different plan that we keep telling you about, trying to explain it to you, that there are white hat operations, there are game theory operations of how they gave, the elections to Biden, because Biden went forward with the pandemic and the vaccines and all these lockdowns, a lot of stuff, because that's going to expose a full world order operations. And that has to go to that executive order that I was talking about in the last video, where Trump, the alliance, are going after, the full operations around the world. And that executive order is coming back. That's going to come back into play in 2026. But at the same time, with shootings, chaos inside of the United States, a lot of stuff, this division, a lot of this is still real. There's still a war that is still happening. Even though the white hats have captured a lot of the underground bases, the stuff that we've been talking about, even though the white hats have captured a lot of the banking systems around the world, the black hat operations, even though the white hats have captured a lot of operations, there are still a lot of rogue agencies, a lot of rogue players. They still have this huge plan still to try to create civil unrest, still try to create a war. They're still trying to facilitate, this huge destruction of the United States. And they're trying desperately as they can, because this is connected to tribunals. This is connected to Trump, the military, putting people to death, taking all of their assets, taking all of their money. And these people are fighting as hard as they can to create this chaos. So I'm sorry, really to report something like this again, that this shooting's happening. And I just want to tell you that it's really strange. What makes everything strange is that this is what the wires were reporting in the underground, the cables. And that's why I made that emergency report over the weekend. And that's where we are. That's where we're at, guys. And I try to give you the cables. I try to give you the wires. You know what? As a part of, as a part of the Great Awakening, as a part of, people who believe inside of MAGA, people who are, who are more conservative, people who consider themselves world patriots, or else anons. We just give you information, important information, and you can make choices off of that. There's a different side, a different view to where they really try to push you into an occult, into hating, into trying to use violence against, against the people that I just named. these groups that we're in, these different beliefs that we have, an idea of nonviolence, an idea of exposing the world corruption, an idea to bring down agencies that have been creating corruption through the world that's connected to certain parties. So we give you information so you can think about these things on your own. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do anything. We always ask that you only have faith. You only try to use your vibrations. And I always talk about that, the power of your DNA, the power of the plasma energy, infinite energy, connected to the earth, the sun, the sacred spirit, that energy. Always tell you to pray in these hard moments. Always tell you it's important, even though you don't feel like it. Your spirit is so important inside of this global energy of a great awakening. Your spirit is so important for your own self, of a beautiful life journey that you're trying to create, that energy. But inside of that life journey that you're creating, you also have compassion for the world, third world countries, people sitting in prison for no reason, being prosecuted because, because maybe they're considered to be, right-wing extremists, because they're in prison for different things connected to political warfare. There's so much stuff happening that we can't always just think about ourselves. And that's what that Great Awakening movement is, that energy that was moving through that is still moving through MAGA, moving through the Patriot community, the worldwide Patriot community, the Anons, all these different names, but it's just to show the Great Awakening. It's about yourself, but it's also about this energy. And I know it's really hard, these moments that we're in, you guys, but I want you guys to have faith, because I was giving you these warnings for a long time. A lot of us were giving you the real warnings that these events are coming, you guys, these powerful events of the civil unrest, civil war. The military is doing everything that they can. Trump is doing everything that he can. He's moving so hard. Even in this first year, it's not even 1 year yet since January 20th. So he's working so hard to take on the cartels. He's going after the United Nations. He's going after the exposure of the elections that's going to connect to all the different election frauds. He's going after the corruption, everything. So when you see something like James Comey getting off the FBI director, everybody's upset, everybody's angry about this, nothing's happening. I said, don't worry about this. I had already said, yeah, he's arrested, but don't worry if something happens. Alex Jones, some other bigger heads have also been saying that most likely James Comey's going to get off. Don't worry about it. I'm saying don't worry about it because everything in that area with James Comey, we know that James Comey has already given all the information. What's strange about James Comey is he was missing for a long time, then he just popped up out of nowhere. But James Comey, behind the scenes, has already given all the information. He has already saying it's like he's an informant now. So whatever's going to happen with James Comey, the FBI director, the corrupt judge, that that closed the case, everything, that there's no case, and these guys were freed. Trump, the administration, Department of Justice, is going to expose this full corruption behind the judicial system. That's why Trump gave you the information last week. He was saying that military is the only way, that what happens when the judiciary system is corrupt, it has to go towards military. After Trump says that, It's not coincidence that this event happened. James Comey gets off. This corrupt judge lets things happen. Everything's going to come full circle with what's happening with James Comey, the judicial system. So I just wanted to give you that a little bit, that it's all a setup. It's all leading towards the Department of Justice is going to go after these judges inside the United States. This is all leading to executive orders that's coming in January. It's interesting in that form, but it's not a good thing what happened today. You know, I'm just kind of beside myself. Like I said, I have a lot more thoughts to talk about. I have a lot more stuff to say about the shooting today, but I'll keep that for a few days or a few weeks. That's Johnny. So I'll keep those thoughts to myself, and we'll talk about that later. Now you know that Trump is going to designate, the Muslims, the Brotherhood of the Muslims inside the United States as a terrorist group. So all of this stuff is kind of a show in some form. Of course, we're inside of war, but there's also this powerful show because most of the operations are captured. The stuff that you're seeing over in New York City, the whole thing is scripted. The whole thing is planned. What's happening in New York City, how New York City elected this new leader. The whole thing is scripted. Everything's going to flip. What's going to happen in New York City? New York City isn't even going to look like what it's looking like now. Businesses close, all of this stuff that happened in New York City these past years, riots, people moving out, everything's going to change inside of New York City. The reason I'm saying that is because Musk, Russia, a lot of developers from Europe are already talking with Trump in redeveloping New York City for the future. They want to bring in some new, not enterprises, but new projects inside of New York City at the end of 2028. They have a huge project. That means most likely, we all know what's going to happen, okay? I think everybody knows the idea. New York's going to go crazy. Riots going to happen. 2026 elections is going to go crazy, bonkers. People are going to be getting arrested inside of New York City because now we know that the New York mafia, the military reached out to them. This happened during the shutdown. The New York mafia, the 5 families, are working behind the scenes to expose the cartels, to expose certain operations. This is going to lead to the same thing to New York leaders throughout all different regions inside of New York. Corruption scandal that's going to be gigantic, huge, but you're not going to hear about the mafia working with the military. You're not going to hear that. You're just going to hear about this huge, gigantic cartel network through New York City that was controlling the gangs, the drug trade, controlling the corruption, controlling all of these different things that's happening. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to see in 2026. And then you're going to see the riots, and people are going to be upset about the elections in 2026 because that's going to paper ballots. Everything's going to change. And a little more on that front, on the Dominion, these voting machines. Now we know that Trump forced Venezuela to sell the company, to Liberty. And those operations are going to be corrected. It's going to be controlled, but they had to get a hold of this company, the Dominion company, and take over it. That way all the elections in different countries can be corrected. So a lot of stuff has been happening behind the scenes. It's continued to happen behind the scenes, and there's a lot of panic. Now there's panic also with this Muslim Brotherhood. From what I heard already inside of Los Angeles, this is from the prison wires from inside of prison. There's people that have been arrested inside of Los Angeles, all the way heading up into Oregon. That has to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. And it has to do with them facilitating terrorist networks inside of the United States. So as we keep on moving forward, January, February, you're going to see the exposure of different cells, terrorist cells, even connected to Iran, connected to the Muslim Brotherhood, different groups, ISIS, all these different groups, the terrorist groups from the Middle East. It's going to set off operations for the military to intercede inside of the United States. This is all heading to 11.3 military operations. Everything that you're seeing is headed towards this military operation and the exposure of 2020, the exposure of 2024, the election stuff. So I want to give you guys this report, and I didn't really expect this today, and I didn't expect to do a live. I didn't expect to do a live show, and I was already working. And so yeah, I have some other stuff I'll save for Friday. I had some other stuff I want to talk about. Bill Gates, the real execution, what really happened to him, and the real story of what happened to Bill Gates. He was threatening the United States, and he was carrying this vial around inside of Washington, D.C., and he was killed over that vial by the military. And people kind of have that story out there, very important people on the inside. So I'll get a hold of those videos. Then I want to talk about a few different things, but most important is that, I want to give this live broadcast about what's happening.
Follow News 17 channel in Patreon and get the full behind-the-scene reports and intel.